We are creatures of habit. So often, we find ourselves locked into patterns we consciously wish to change. But what if this inability to change isn't a personal failure? What if it's a matter of design? This is an analysis of what we might call the architecture of human inertia.
When we fail to change, the explanation we reach for is almost always a moral one. We say it's a deficit of discipline, a weakness of willpower, or maybe a simple lapse in commitment. This is the conventional moral interpretation. But if this was just about individual attributes, you'd expect the pattern of failure to be random. It isn't. Across almost any domain you can think of, the cycle is remarkably consistent. You have intention, then some momentum, followed by resistance, and finally relapse. This pattern isn't just occasional, it is predictable.
The very predictability of this cycle suggests the cause is not some random personal failing. No, the resistance we feel to change isn't accidental. It appears to be structural. So, to really understand this structural nature of inertia, we first have to deconstruct the main explanation we have for personal change. And this brings us to a foundational idea, the myth of willpower. We often think of change as a single event, a decision we make. But this view is flawed. Change is not an action. It's a process. And more specifically, it's a sustained destabilization of an existing identity. An identity as a system is built for one primary purpose: to resist exactly that kind of destabilization.
If resistance to change is actually rooted in protecting our identity, then to understand inertia, we have to start by examining the architecture of that identity, the internal system itself.
Your nervous system isn't optimized for growth or even for improvement. It's optimized for survival. And survival prioritizes what's predictable over what's new. It prioritizes conserving energy over expending it. So from a purely operational standpoint, any behavior that doesn't result in immediate danger gets categorized as acceptable, and it's preserved. Improvement is at best a secondary objective. You see, habits aren't just isolated behaviors. They're deeply integrated components of a coherent idea of self. This integration often comes out in identity statements, things like, I am this kind of person, or I just don't do that. So when you threaten a core habit, you're actually threatening the entire narrative of who you think you are. And when that identity gets challenged, the system activates a psychological defense. This defense shows up as resistance, which we often misinterpret as self-sabotage. But in reality, it's a protective mechanism. It's designed to maintain the stability of the identity structure that's already in place. This internal architecture of identity, however, doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's in a constant dialogue with, and is continuously shaped by, some very powerful external systems. Think about it like this. An intention is a temporary internal signal. Your environment, on the other hand, is a continuous external one. The brain is structured to respond much more strongly to the continuous data from the outside than to temporary commands from the inside. So when your surroundings reinforce an old behavior, your intention will predictably collapse. The cause is structural, even though the failure feels intensely personal.
Behaviors become entrenched through neurological reinforcement. Every time you repeat an action, you strengthen a neural circuit. This repetition builds efficiency, which in turn reduces the cognitive friction for the next time. Eventually, a path of least resistance is literally carved into the brain, creating a closed, self-reinforcing loop. Change also faces resistance from our social systems. When one person in a group changes in a significant way, the group's equilibrium gets disturbed. The group will then unconsciously exert pressure to restore the previous state. This phenomenon is known as social homeostasis. The pressure is usually subtle, a doubtful question, a skeptical look, but its cumulative effect is powerful.
Beyond these powerful external forces, the very act of changing itself carries a significant internal, cognitive cost. The process of change is, by its very nature, destabilizing. It increases your cognitive load, it increases uncertainty. The brain's more primitive threat detection systems register this discomfort not as growth, but as a potential error. The logic is brutally simple. If this feels wrong, it must be wrong. The system then triggers a retreat back to what is familiar and stable. The brain is also hardwired to discount the value of future rewards. It will always prioritize immediate comfort and stability over some distant, abstract gain.
And since most meaningful change requires sustained effort for a delayed payoff, the motivational signal for that kind of action is inherently weak. We all construct coherent narratives to make sense of our past and our present. Change disrupts this narrative continuity. It forces us to rewrite a core personal story, which is a cognitively expensive task. And the brain, which is optimized for energy conservation, naturally resists it.
Willpower and attention, they're finite resources. So under conditions of stress, fatigue, or any kind of cognitive overload, the brain conserves energy by defaulting to its automated processes. And these automated processes are, by definition, old, established patterns. So the greater the external pressure, the more difficult change becomes. So you have the resistance from our internal architecture, the reinforcement from our external environment, and the inherent cognitive cost of change. All of them combine. They create a powerful, systemic force that works to maintain the status quo. We can define this force as structural inertia, the tendency of any established system, whether it's personal or social, to resist change and maintain its current trajectory. It's not a flaw in the individual components, it's a fundamental property of the system itself. Even patterns that appear harmful on the surface often provide hidden benefits. They offer predictability, they can secure a sense of belonging within a social group, they maintain a coherent identity, and they provide a certain emotional familiarity. Stability, even a dysfunctional stability, often feels safer than the uncertainty of aspiration. All of this data points to an uncomfortable reality. A failure to change is rarely the result of insufficient strength. It's the result of trying to overcome systemic resistance without ever addressing the system itself. Genuine change seems to require the simultaneous management of identity disruption, environmental redesign, social friction, and a prolonged period of uncertainty. And so, remaining the same is not a failure of will. It is the logical, predictable outcome of a complex system simply following the path of least destabilization. If change requires disrupting identity, environment, and stability at the same time, what would make someone willing to accept that cost?